My name is Daniela. Not so long ago, I had my younger sister by the name of Chloe. I've been dreaming about this for so long because I was an only child in my family. But my joy was not long. After a while, terrible things started happening in our family, and I think my little sister was involved. Parents adopted her at an orphanage. My mother couldn't get pregnant for a long time, but when she did, the baby was born dead. The mother could not believe it, and for a long time she could not recover from such a shock, which served as a discord and a cold relationship with father. They could not have any more children. Everyone pretended that everything was normal so that it would not affect me in any way, but something in me remained, something that from time to time ached in my chest. My parents put it all down to childhood trauma, and they didn't tell me much about their life. They decided that you cannot live in the past and should not drown in grief, and a decent time has passed since this tragedy. I grew up and turned 15. My parents decided to revive their happy family. They finally had another long-awaited daughter, and I have a little sister. This was the path to harmony in the family. If someone can't have children and someone has lost their parents, then why not to help each other? To not brighten up the lives of people who have lost their most valuable things? After all, my parents took a long time to come to this. They had the strength and courage to adopt Chloe. She was 12 years old. My parents wanted a younger child, I will not hide it, but she was a gifted and capable child, which immediately attracted attention to her. Well-mannered, polite, talented, with a great interest in drawing and studying, and a good attitude to all adults and teachers of the orphanage. This set her apart from the noisy and naughty children. Her first day at school was very difficult for her. I supported her in every possible way and accompanied her to school lunch and recess. School children poked at her and called her a foundling. The latter made Chloe lose her temper, and she pushed one of the boys and ran out of the school crying. Months passed, and this boy had a fracture. He was riding at a considerable speed on his bike because he was afraid to get wet on the road because of the rain, and his joy was unlimited because this bike was stolen from him, and he found it a couple of days later in the back of the house. Maybe one of the boys joked, he thought. I thought so too, until I found out that the bike was faulty. His father said something about pedals, bearings, threads. I don't know the details. But I definitely suspect who is involved in this and who went to such a cruel act. It is not to pour a bottle of water on the offender and not to stain the chair with chalk. It was a deliberate intent to harm and take revenge on the person. But who would believe it? And I chose to remain silent, sometimes even doubting my perception. Until the chain of coincidences and accidents began, when children were fighting or getting into trouble, they were seriously injured and severely damaged. Chloe was always there and surprisingly not at all involved. This was a huge noise for our school because it was famous for its reputation of excellent, good, and decent students. The puzzle was quickly put together when, at the insistence of her mother, Chloe was told to stay away from such incidents and pay more attention to her studies, setting me as an example. It all quickly turned into a wild scandal. Mother first questions Chloe's poise, but father, who came home late from work, did not believe his wife and said that this was just a teenage rebellion and she overestimated the importance to it. In the morning, my mother found my dead kitty in her bed, which was clearly smashed with a rock. Immediately, my mother rushed into our room and pulled Chloe out of her bed, and she got up and smiled ominously, as if nothing had happened. Began to comb her hair in front of the mirror and asked what they could do to her. Beat her? Give her back? Daddy won't let me do that. He loves me. At worst, I'll accuse you of periodically beating me up. I hope we understand each other. After this conversation, my mother and I buried the animal. The parents' relationship began to deteriorate because he didn't like his wife's behavior toward Chloe. He wasn't there. He didn't know the whole truth. The final push to discord was the mother's argument that the shelter has no information about the origin of this sinister Chloe. It turned out that she was transferred from another orphanage that burned down in the fire. She was silent for a long time and did not answer questions. Nothing was preserved, and the decision was made to leave her, not to throw her out on the street. I haven't lived with my father since. They moved in with my grandmother. We see each other occasionally, but I don't know what's going on in Chloe's life. And today, I found out that my grandmother died from a gas leak. She did not like Chloe, considered her a stranger and negligent. They blamed it all on my unfortunate father, who long ago got drunk after the divorce and stopped caring for his daughter and participating in her life. It looked like an obvious murder, the motive being the house. Yes, and Chloe confirmed conflicts between her father and grandmother on the grounds of property. I didn't believe it because they had a great relationship. And why would he do that if the house was registered to him and she was helping him live? Just live. Everything was already on her slender shoulders. They decided to send Chloe to our house until she came of age. I wondered why all this was happening. Why is she coming back? No, I understand why. But what can we expect? Revenge? Reprisal? Retribution? What other surprises will present us with the fate of Chloe? Who is she and what is her purpose? I reread and saw a lot of stories about mental illness and abnormalities, movies about children from orphanages, but it all looks like fiction and fiction. No one believes them, and I understand them. I write this with fear and with tears in my eyes. I'm afraid for myself and my mother, and I'm afraid to even imagine the consequences. I'll have to live with her for 3 more years, 3 whole years, if I live to see this day.
Do you have a little brother or sister? How do you feel about them? Have you ever thought about what would happen if you were left alone without them? My name is Mark. I want to tell you about my sister, or rather, why I hated her. Usually when another child is born in the family, it is groomed and cherished the most. And all because he is small. He is the youngest in the family, and accordingly, he needs more attention than the others. For me, it turned out very differently. When I was born, I wasn't the best. I didn't have any privileges. I didn't get snickered at. I didn't get more toys, and I didn't get more pocket money than my sister. She was more loved than I was. I had the feeling that she was younger than I was, although the age difference is 5 years. My sister's name is Alice. No, she's a good person and sometimes a good sister. Sometimes when she was in a good mood, she would bring me home new toys, ice cream, or even give me money. But there were days when she looked awful and acted like a bitch. She could have thrown me out of the room and slammed the door in my face. I didn't understand why her parents didn't scold her at such times. Why did they punish me for any such outbursts? Was she on a special account? But why and how? I remember once I had a birthday, but my parents said that there was no money for the celebration. And I wanted this event so much. I waited a whole year to ask for a new skate as a gift. And then, such a bummer. Naturally, my mood fell. The next day passed as usual, and in the late afternoon, I noticed that my mother was packing a suitcase somewhere. When I asked where she was going, she said that she and Alice should go to another country, and then promised that they would return soon. What? Another country? But how? Why not me? Why her? Why does she always get the best of everything? So they don't have money for a new skate and cake, but they do have money to go to other countries? Why should I do all this? My heart was filled with hatred for Alice that night. I went to her bedroom, watched her pack her own things, and just silently hated her. I have often wondered why they should have another child if there is no place for it in their heart. This unloved, sometimes superfluous member of the family was me. As long as I can remember, I've been trying to figure out the secret of my sister's difference from me. And can everything be simpler? It's just that she's she and I'm I. This continued for several more years, and things got even worse. My parents almost stopped noticing me over the years. I was in the house like a shadow, and I had already learned not to talk to them much. and not to pay attention to the way they hung around this witch. I went to school, did my own homework, signed up for sports clubs, and made plans to get out of the house as soon as possible. Yes, I made a final decision for myself. They will be better off without me, or rather, they will not even notice my absence. I just needed to find a place to live and some part-time work for minors. I waited for the day when my mom and dad left on some business. They promised to return late at night. I picked up my duffel bag from under the bed and headed for the exit. As I was walking down the hall, Alice noticed me. "Hey Mark, where are you going?" she asked me. I was rude when I said it was none of her business. "What difference does it make? Do you care?" I shouted back. Alice made a surprised face, came up to me and asked why I was angry and rude to her. This question enraged me even more. I realized that the silence accumulated over the past months was about to tear me apart, and I gave in to emotions and I told my favorite parents everything I thought about my family. You ask why I'm angry? Because I don't exist in your fucking family. You live your own life. Parents have recently ceased to be interested in how I'm doing. You sit down to dinner separately, separate from me. When I get home, no one even yells, "Mark, hi, how you doing?" And no one asks me how I'm doing at school. Do any of you know that I'm captain of the high school basketball team? Did you know that I've been going to a music club for a year now and I've learned to play the guitar? Yes, I learned to cook food myself with the help of Google. And all because you are not near me. You then with your father, then with your mother, travel around the world, go to some countries and do not even tell where you rested? And I wasn't even taken once. And then you ask why I'm angry? Maybe because I'm not your family, I shouted. I was yelling so hard that I thought my lungs were going to explode from the strain. I blushed and my eyes were streaming with tears. The resentment I had accumulated over the years spoke to me. Alice just stood there looking at me and crying. She just said, "I'm sorry," in a low voice. "Is that all? I'm sorry?" I asked her. She roared louder than me, slammed the door to the room, and cried. I didn't know what was going on. It turns out that my parents were standing behind me. They looked very depressed. Mom was crying too, and then she and Dad took me to the kitchen. My father said they had a serious conversation for me. I was prepared to hear that I was not their own child, that they had taken me for a fool, and now they were sorry and I had to leave. "Your sister has cancer," my mother said. She wept even louder. Dad put his arm around her, but he didn't look up from the floor. At that moment, I felt sick. I was prepared for anything but this news. Suddenly, I felt hurt, ashamed, and angry at the same time. "She was diagnosed with the disease a couple months before you were born, and your dad and I threw all our energy into her treatment. Alice was looking forward to your birth. When you were in my tummy, she read you her favorite stories every day. In the countries we went to, she received chemotherapy, after which she was very ill for a while. She sometimes couldn't even walk on her own, so she often kept the door to her room closed or maliciously kicked you out. She just forbade us to tell you about it because she wanted you not to be sad," my mother said. Then she pointed out that she was very sorry for me because when they saved one child, they did not notice how they destroyed another, me. I don't think I felt any worse. You can't imagine how bad I felt at that moment. I thought of such terrible things. I hated Alice, and I did everything I could to offend her. I just looked at my parents and cried. My sister came up behind me and gave me a big hug. I couldn't say a word. She calmed me down and said it was all her own fault. "I still love you, you stupid boy," she said, and laughed. That night, for the first time in my life, I had such a long, open, honest, and frank conversation. All I asked was that you let me take care of her. Now, in all her chemo sessions, I was there for her, feeding her, reading her books, playing the guitar, singing songs. A few more years passed. Alice still has to undergo intensive treatment, but I'm happier than ever because I can be near my sister, whom I love more than anyone in the world.
Sometimes it is surprising how amazing things happen in the lives of people who are no longer looking for happiness. I want to tell you about an unexpected turn in my dearest sister's story. It is about her fake marriage. We live far away from each other. Life scattered us, but sometimes we meet, go to visit, but rarely. We were on the phone more often, but still not every day. I can say that I just watch her life from the side. Unfortunately, I participate in it just a little. She married early, in my opinion. She was only 19 at the time, and their marriage was not reliable. After a year of marriage, she was fading. She was not funny and cheerful, and more often without mood and annoyed. Of course, such relationships sooner or later led to divorce, which soon happened. After him, she didn't want any relationships, didn't look for men, but really wanted a baby. She couldn't give birth by herself. The doctors diagnosed the barrenness. I remember that day she came home very upset and cried all night and couldn't calm down. As a sister, I tried to talk to her and find a solution. We talked for a long time, drank tea with sweets. As I know, sweet things cheer you up. In the end, she decided to go to the baby's house and find her little angel for herself. But this was not without problems. Although she earns well, she was still told that they only give children to full families. But my sister's character is not simple either. If she wants something, she will definitely do everything to achieve the goal. Then, without thinking twice, she decided to cheat. It is clear that this is not the best option, but she really wanted to become a mother, to have meaning in life. She decided on a fake marriage. Among her friends, as it turned out, there were no suitable candidates. She started searching the internet. It wasn't really important for her to find the perfect man for herself, since he was just needed for the acting role of a supposedly real husband. She didn't want to get married again, especially live together, and met a man on Facebook from her town. He was also divorced at the time. They met in a cafe, and she immediately told him everything as it really is. And she made it clear that she was not interested in a relationship, but simply wanted to offer him a fake marriage. It is clear that he was shocked at the time. No one makes such requests. But then they sat and talked. He said that he would think about it. Sister became not comfortable before him, but there was nothing to do. Fortunately, a week later, he called her back and said that he agreed, but they would have to sign a contract just in case she left him naked. Well, that wasn't a problem, you know. So they went to the registry office and signed it, quietly, without ceremony. My sister couldn't wait to adopt a little girl. A couple weeks later, he went with her to an orphanage to fill out the adoption papers. My sister always wanted a daughter. There she saw a very pretty little girl. She immediately sank into her soul, and so her dream came true, though not so quickly. She has to collect a lot of documents to prove that they can provide and raise a child. It took a couple of months before they gave her the girl. With this guy during this time, she already managed to make friends. Just talked, sometimes called on working issues, and just like normal friends, but nothing more. But went to pick up their daughter together so that the teachers do not have suspicions. And besides, they didn't immediately get a divorce so that the social service wouldn't suspect a fake. 6 months passed, and then destiny interrupted again. There was a fire in the house where her fake husband lived. Several apartments burned down, including his. He had no one else in town, and his parents were long dead. And she offered to let him live with them for a while he could find another place to live, in retaliation for his kindness. He agreed to her suggestion, but since he didn't want to embarrass her too much, he said that he would buy the food then, and it's just for a couple months while he gets her apartment back up. I don't know exactly how they did it, but then about a couple months after he moved in, I saw her Facebook photos of her, him, and the baby. They looked so happy and pleased, just like a real family. Of course, I couldn't resist and start calling. Instead of hello, I heard in the phone, they changed their minds about getting a divorce. Of course, I wanted a lot of details, but all I heard was that she didn't understand how he became something more to her than a fake husband. And now their daughter is already a year and a half old. I went to the holiday. They look like a happy young family. If someone doesn't know how it all started, they won't guess. He loves her. He cares for both of them. I'm very happy for her, although I still can't believe it happened. It is interesting that sometimes fortune can turn around in ways that we would not have thought possible. And all in the end, ends in the best way. Tell us in the comments if this story may have happened to you or your friends. And don't forget to subscribe.
Hi everyone, my name is Mike. I have a little sister named Jessica. Once I found out about her secret, which she never told. To say that I was in shock is to say nothing. When I was 6 years old, I was joyfully informed that my mother went to the store for my sister. My mother was gone for 12 days, and then all sorts of aunts and neighbors ran in with gifts and booties, and everyone was happy and looked at something lying on my bed and constantly yawning. They told me that this is now my sister. After a good look at it, I asked my mother only 2 questions. Mom, couldn't you have picked a better one at the store? And why is she always making faces? That's how my little sister came into my life. As a child, like all other boys, I wanted a younger brother to play together as hooligans, but fortune gave me a little sister. Fortunately, Jessica was a kid, and we could play different boyish games. She was no worse than a boy, and could even stand up for herself. But with the arrival of my sister, all the attention in the family switched to her. All my toys were no longer mine. She could easily have come and taken any one she wanted, and if I objected, my mother told me not to be greedy, especially for my sister's sake. Since childhood, my parents had taught me to care for and protect her, that I am, as an older brother, responsible for her. So I made sure that something did not happen to her by accident, or that she didn't put any dirt in her mouth. She always wanted to taste everything. All the items she had in her hand dragged into her mouth. I couldn't always keep track of her. Once we played with her in the courtyard of the house. She is fast and loves to run. She ran around the yard like mad. She ran so hard that her legs knocked down and she fell and hit the slide. Immediately, blood appeared on her face. I was in a panic, and I'm afraid of blood. I ran home as fast as I could and called my mother. She saw Jessie and screamed in fear and called an ambulance. While the ambulance was driving, my mother and I tried to stop the blood. Fortunately, the injury was not serious, just a split eyebrow. There was no concussion. But from the moment she starts running, I try to be close to her and run after her. She thinks we're playing catch-up, but she can run like this for hours. Sometimes it's really hard to keep up with her. Growing up, everyone has their own interests, and we were no longer able to spend time together so closely. Our communication consisted of teasing each other. I didn't even know her friends, or what she was interested in. She sat in her room all day, sometimes just going out for dinner. It was strictly forbidden to enter her room, and I had no particular desire to do so. I had my own amusements. One evening, passing by her room, I saw a laptop on her bed. In it, all the time came some messages without stopping. Usually her door was always closed. Jessica went somewhere and forgot to close the door behind her. It was really interesting to see who so relentlessly writes. I couldn't resist going in to see who it was. It turned out that her friends in the group wrote to her. Everyone asked to show them something. I understand they wanted to see something from my sister, but what exactly was not clear. At the moment when I was reading, in the room went Jessica and quickly ran up and closed the laptop. She angrily looked at me and kicked me out of the room. The question of what she was supposed to show her friends remained in my mind and did not give rest. I had to find out what it was, and I began to watch her. I tried to notice any changes, but nothing strange happened. Even went to her room one night and stole her laptop, but there was a password that I didn't know. All my attempts resulted in failure, but fortune has given me another chance. Once, I accidentally noticed a black spot on the skin under Jessica's t-shirt, something like a birthmark. But as a child, I didn't notice it, and if I did, I would have noticed it. I didn't know what it was yet, although I had various guesses in my head. Then I decided to cheat. I went without knocking to her room and said that I knew everything. I didn't even know what I knew, but my sister was in shock. First of all, for the fact that I went so unexpected, and that I knew everything. I saw panic in her eyes, and then she started crying and begging not to tell anyone about it. I honestly did not expect such a reaction from her. I said it was a joke. I did not think she would start to cry. I hadn't seen her like this. She began to calm down and admit that it was a joke. She barely regained consciousness. And since then, there is still some kind of secret. She had no other choice. She had to share her information. She picked up and showed me her belly tattoo. There was a drawing of a butterfly. I was really shocked. The fact is that our family strictly followed the rules in sequence. We were not even allowed to go out or hang out. And if our parents found out about the tattoo, the scandal would be strong. She told me that she has a best friend named Emily. So this girl was also very nimble. And unfortunately, her appendix was removed as a child. The scar was large and not beautiful. She didn't know how to cover it and decided to get a tattoo on the scar. But she was doubting and didn't have the courage to do it. And my sister, as a best friend, decided to support her and agreed to do a tattoo with her, so they did both. After hearing the story, I seemed to understand that friends need to be supported. But so, it was too much for me. Jessica asked me not to tell my parents, otherwise she'd get in a lot of trouble. I decided to keep this secret with her. After all, she is my sister. We must support each other. I promised that no one would find out about it, but she forbade me to do such reckless things. And of course, as an older brother, I advised her to behave well. So I had a little secret with my sister. Of course, it is bad that our parents were not told. I feel guilty in front of them. But I hope that in time there will be a convenient moment when my sister will be able to admit about her tattoo.
Hi, my name is Rachel or Richie. I was 18 when I went to college, and I always wanted to study computer programming. I dreamed of making new friends, and the change of environment itself will bring a lot of new experiences. First, I will tell you a little bit about my family. My father heads a construction company. My mother is a housewife, and they have 8 children, including me, 7 sons, and me. Ask what it's like to live with 7 brothers, and I'll tell you. I was born the middle child, the 4th in a row. For as long as I can remember, Dad's garage was always full of toy guns, cars, and soldiers. The father barely had any time to buy new toys, as they were immediately destroyed by one of the sons, not specially, of course, during the game. Too much brothers loved to get used to the role of the Hulk and other Marvel characters. Time passed, and gradually toys were replaced by gadgets, game consoles. The boys grew, and with them increased the number of dirty socks scattered around the house. But you can't imagine what went on in our bathroom when the boys shaved their beards. Our family bought men's looms and shaving foam at the supermarket like matches on the last day before the apocalypse. The trips to the hairdresser, they carried more than I am. But most of all, I didn't love when they all played football together. Why? Because after an interesting game, when they entered the house, the living room turned into a torture chamber of smell of sweat. Our dog, with its super sense, hid under the carpet at such moments as the ostrich, searching for ways to escape. My father was happy that the house had the power to fix something, move it, rearrange it. None of this was a problem. Only my mom and I had problems. My mother had a headache about how she feeds this football team, and I had to clean up these dirty socks after them. Being the only sister wasn't so easy. On the one hand, I had a lot of defenders. On the other, these heroes often did not mind their own business. For example, whenever I was going on a date, my older brother would give me extra work so that I would be later tired, and the middle ones would be telling me about how young I was. Oh, it drives me crazy, and my brothers made every date a quest. There was a feeling that the main goal of the evening was the only one thing: to ruin my date. One day I was sitting with my boyfriend John in a cafe having dinner. The evening was as beautiful as my couple. We planned to take a little walk around the city after a delicious meal. I wanted to enjoy the summer evening. My date asked the waiter for the bill. "Do you have card or cash?" I heard a very familiar voice. When I looked up, I saw my brother at number 3. He came smiling to our table in a waiter's uniform. Don't ask how he got it. He wanted to get a closer look at my boyfriend. "By card," said my boyfriend, and I, being in shock, opened my mouth and watched as my dear brother grabs my hand, pulls me out of the cafe, and says I didn't like him. To say that I was angry is to say nothing. It seems that all the customers of the restaurant that night were in shock from such a cheeky waiter and did not dare to ask for the bill for a long time. My brother managed to force me out onto the terrace before John jumped up and ran after us. Not finding out about anything, Johnny just knocked my brother down with an uppercut, and he attacked him. My God, there was a fight between them, in which my screams and attempts to stop them were useless. I don't want to say about the minutes of shame among the cafe's guests. 3 minutes later, they were separated by passers-by. At this moment, I was all in tears, hysterical and shouting about how I was ashamed of such a relative. "Brother?" asked John. "Nice uppercut," my brother said, and shook John's hand. He could read a lot of questions in my eyes, but I knew that a man's conversation was brewing between them. So I said goodbye to John, called a taxi, and went home. I will probably never know what kind of test my favorite brothers gave, but I will say one thing. 6 months later, John proposed marriage to me, and very soon I will have to meet his family. By the way, he has 7 sisters.